I've heard some people ask, why Dr. Stone? Those who share this viewpoint seem to think that it's a fine enough show, but they wonder why the series gets more attention and praise than many of its contemporaries. I'll be the first to admit that on the surface, Dr. Stone seems to have many of the same components as the standard shonen anime. A protagonist who appears dense to their peers and has an obsession with a specific niche interest that he wants to know absolutely everything about, a cast of characters that increases as our protagonist gets the opportunity to demonstrate his particular skill set, and a lead character with a strong, unwavering moral viewpoint. But there are several key elements that separate Dr. Stone from most of its shonen counterparts. One very important one is that the skill Senku, our protagonist, has devoted his life to is science, a real, albeit broad interest that can be and is studied extensively in the world we live in. Sure, Senku has an unrealistic mastery of so many various scientific disciplines at such a young age, but it still stands that everything Senku does is replicable in the real world. Everything that Senku creates and the methods he utilizes to create them are all things that you or I could do if we had the wherewithal to do so. And this is a subtle but important distinction from the disciplines that other shonen leads practice. Having the discipline our protagonist practices be a real area of study makes the difficulties he and his colleagues encounter to progress forward on their journey feel more real. When a shonen character is struggling to use a new power or ability, you can never really understand what that means for the character, because you have nothing to relate to. You can't really fathom the amount of skill, power, training, and so on, the mechanics necessary to use that ability. But the various creations that Senku develops in order to further his and his allies' goals are all based upon the application of hard work and ingenuity toward developing real-world tools and apparatuses. It is easier to understand the difficulty of developing Senku's creations because you are able to better relate to a task that we all know real humans can and have accomplished. Dr. Stone isn't the first shonen to focus on a central character building a society from the ground up as they interact with new and varied companions. That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime is a good series to compare Dr. Stone to when examining this element of the respective shows. Both series feature eccentric leads who work with unique characters as they build a society. But there are two elements that, in my view, separate Dr. Stone from Slime, and elevate the show above many other anime in general, those being the portrayal of the characters and the incorporation of science. The characters in That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime and many similar series exist purely to help our lead. Sure, they may have fun and quirky personalities, but we only ever see glimpses of their lives as they relate to our lead's story. In that sense, the characters of Slime are more akin to tools for the story's creators to use for their respective purposes when necessary than they are actually developed characters. The characters in Dr. Stone, in comparison, feel more autonomous. We see more moments of them interacting with one another, and as a result we get to understand their goals and personalities better. We see how Senku's presence in their lives affects them and their ways of thinking, and we are able to witness relationships they have with one another, as well as the effect that Senku has had on these relationships. The characters in Dr. Stone feel like a community, like real people with real goals and aspirations. This elevates the show for me because in understanding these characters, their relationships with each other, and in watching them grow and develop over the course of the series, it is easier for me to care about them and their plights. I don't feel nearly the same level of connection with the cast of Slime due to the lack of attention given to the majority of the cast of that show. The second element that makes Dr. Stone unique is the incorporation of science. In Slime, a vast majority of the society's construction takes place in quick montage sequences early on in the show. Dr. Stone, on the other hand, takes the society builder aspect of the show a notch further by allowing us to see the process in detail of how the society actually gets built, one invention at a time. Everything from creating copper tubing to making ramen, we see all the varying processes necessary to construct each element, in both the construction of a society and the furthering of Senku and his allies' ambitions. And the show does a wonderful job of balancing the conveyance of this information with keeping the pacing of the series fast. It never really feels like a process is being skipped over, and it always seems like we are getting the necessary amount of detail needed to understand all of the steps in an item's creation. However, the series doesn't spend so much time going over the minutiae of such creations that the show feels stagnant. Now, the series doesn't spend too much time focusing on one specific thing. Instead, Dr. Stone is actually paced very quickly. I mentioned earlier that we could, in theory, replicate any one of Senku's inventions if we had the drive to do so, which is yet another very important factor that sets Dr. Stone apart from the rest. You see, Senku's accomplishments aren't played off for convenience with the wave of a hat. He doesn't suddenly get power from science when the chips are down and the plot needs him to quickly utilize his scientific knowledge. Instead, his inventions take time, planning, hard work, not just from him, but they also require the dedication of those around him. This is an element that separates Senku from many shonen protagonists, in that he isn't the chosen one. He doesn't have this mastery of science because of circumstances surrounding his birth, family lineage, or even belief in himself, like is the case with many shonen protagonists. The reason Senku is so skilled in science is the constant dedication that he applied to the discipline ever since he was a child, constantly using trial and error, book learning, and experimentation to slowly accumulate the level of knowledge that he has now. I wouldn't call Dr. Stone perfect, but compared to the average shonen, the series has plenty of merits with its fun cast who feel like they have their own goals and motivations, the application of real-world solutions to problems, and a lead character who gained his level of skill through hard work and dedication. All of these are elements that are not very common in the typical shonen anime. And in my view, they are what leaves Dr. Stone a cut above the competition. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more, make sure you like and subscribe.